She, a black millionaire used to living in her controlling husband's shadow, entered the car unsuspecting. But in that moment, the new driver made an unexpected gesture that made her tremble, leaving her shocked at what was to come. Kate stepped out of the building's side entrance and walked toward a black sedan parked by the curb. She wore a tight-fitting dress and high heels. Her hands trembled slightly. Moments before, inside the charity event, her husband, Marcus, had spoken down to her in front of several guests. He had laughed at her suggestion about increasing donations. She had felt her cheeks burn. Now she wanted to get home as fast as possible. She stopped near the car and looked toward the distant skyline. She could see the tall gates of the estate far away, behind rows of manicured gardens and large houses. The mansion she shared with Marcus waited at the end of a long private road. She did not want to go there, but she had nowhere else to go. The new driver, Josh, stood by the rear door. He was young, with short dark hair and steady eyes. He wore a simple black suit and remained quiet. He nodded when she approached, then opened the door without a word. Kate glanced at him. He did not look arrogant or impatient. He looked neutral and calm. She slipped into the back seat. Josh closed the door and walked around to the driver's side. Inside, Kate's phone vibrated. She fished it out of her purse. It was a text message from Marcus. "Return home now. Do not waste time." She sighed. Her throat felt tight. She wanted to ignore him, but she knew that would make things worse. She typed a short reply. "On my way." She watched Josh start the engine. She saw him adjust the rearview mirror and glance at her. She avoided eye contact. Instead, she stared at the seat in front of her. The interior smelled like leather and new car scent. The silence pressed down on her. "Are you comfortable, ma'am?" Josh asked, his voice low and even. Kate cleared her throat. "Yes, I'm fine," she said. She didn't want to talk much. She felt embarrassed and drained. She fixed her gaze on the passing lights outside. They left the event hall behind, moving on to a quiet street lined with tall hedges and ornate fences. Her legs felt tense. She realized she was gripping her purse strap. She forced her hands to relax. Outside, large homes passed by in a blur. She knew each one housed people like her and Marcus, wealthy, polished, often fake. She wondered if any of those women had to deal with the same humiliation she endured. She pushed the thought away. Her phone vibrated again. She glanced down. Another message from Marcus. "Hurry up." She rolled her eyes and tucked the phone away. She did not reply this time. She did not have the energy. Josh turned onto a main road. The lights were brighter here. Cars moved slowly, forming a short line at an intersection. Kate saw a sign for a small cafe she had once wanted to visit, but Marcus had refused. She had never set foot inside it. She hated these restrictions, these subtle orders that shaped her routine. In the mirror, Josh watched her. She noticed and met his gaze for a second. His eyes did not look angry or curious, just attentive. She looked away and pressed her back into the seat. She tried to calm herself. She focused on her breathing. She felt tension in her shoulders and neck. Her mind drifted to her son. He was with a nanny, far from here. She missed him. She barely saw him these days. Marcus controlled those visits too. The car slowed down. The traffic light turned red. 3 cars stood in front of them. Kate heard a faint hum from the air conditioning. The silence was thick. She wondered if she should say something, maybe just to break the stiffness inside the car. Instead, she stayed quiet. Josh tapped the steering wheel lightly. He didn't whistle or hum, just waited. He seemed patient. Kate noticed the wedding band on her finger and felt a sting of resentment. She hated that piece of metal now. She pulled her phone out again and considered calling her friend, but it was late. She placed it back into her purse. The line of cars started moving, but slowly. There must have been a minor accident up ahead. She leaned forward slightly. "What's going on?" she asked softly, more to herself than to Josh. He answered anyway. "Looks like a small jam. Maybe a fender bender, ma'am. We'll move soon." She nodded. His voice was calm. She appreciated that he did not seem nervous or pushy. Most of Marcus's staff avoided speaking to her unless spoken to. Josh was different. He looked younger than most of them. He did not act like the others, who rushed around or showed open deference. He was quiet, but steady. She pulled the purse onto her lap and gripped it again. Her stomach felt uneasy. She remembered the laughter at the event tonight, Marcus's dismissive smirk, the brief chuckle from a guest, the way her words had been brushed aside. She clenched her jaw. She felt stuck in a life she could not control. The car in front moved, and Josh followed. The traffic loosened. Kate checked the time. It was late. She would be home in minutes, facing Marcus's questions or cold remarks. She knew he would not let her relax. He would demand an explanation for why she even considered speaking her mind at the event. He would tell her how foolish she sounded. She prepared herself for that. As the car rolled forward, Kate looked at Josh in the mirror again. She wondered about him. He was new. She knew almost nothing about him. Yet, something about his presence felt odd. He did not carry the tension that the rest of the household staff did. He seemed comfortable in his own skin. She had no idea if that mattered, but she noticed it. Her phone vibrated once more. Another message from Marcus. "We need to talk." She knew that tone. He would not waste time on pleasantries. He would start right in on what she did wrong. She slipped the phone into her purse without responding. The car turned onto a quieter road leading toward the estate. The tall walls and the gated entrance were visible now. The atmosphere inside the car felt heavy, but no one spoke. Kate did not want to break the silence. She wanted to remain as calm as possible before stepping into that house. She did not feel calm, though. Her pulse was rapid. Her mouth felt dry. She inhaled slowly. The car slowed near a security checkpoint. A guard stepped out, recognized the car, and waved it through. Josh nodded at the guard and continued up the private road. The mansion's lights glowed ahead, bright and sterile. They approached the driveway. The ride had been quiet, but each second weighed on Kate's chest. She wondered if life would always feel like this. Her head ached. She did not know what would happen inside. She only knew that she had no choice but to go in and face him. As Josh pulled the sedan to a stop near the main entrance, he glanced at Kate one last time in the mirror. She looked away. She gripped the purse and steadied herself. She prepared to step out and return to the world of her husband's control. The next morning, Kate walked toward the car parked near the mansion's front steps. She wore sunglasses and a simple blouse with trousers. She held her phone tight. Marcus had left early for a meeting, giving no instructions about her day. She wanted to try something small, something he never allowed. Josh stood by the driver's side door, dressed in the same discreet suit as before. He greeted her with a nod. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, opening the rear door for her. Kate slipped into the back seat and fastened her seatbelt. The car smelled the same as last night, leather and some faint cologne. She looked at her phone. She had a photo of her son there, smiling in a park. She missed him. She had asked Marcus if she could visit the boy today, but his response had been vague. Now, she intended to at least stop by a nearby restaurant she had always wanted to see. She was hungry and tired of being told no. "Josh, I'd like to stop somewhere for breakfast," she said quietly, leaning forward. "There's a place about 10 minutes away. Can we go there first?" He glanced at her in the mirror. His eyes showed no confusion. "Yes, ma'am," he said. He started the car and headed down the driveway. Kate relaxed a bit, tapping on her phone screen. No messages from Marcus yet. She felt a small thrill, like she was doing something wrong. She was only going to a restaurant, not committing a crime. Still, she braced herself for a text or a call. As they reached the main road, she noticed the wide lawns and tall hedges. Everything looked calm. She thought about ordering a light breakfast and maybe a coffee. She even considered buying a small gift for her son, something she could bring him when Marcus allowed the next visit. Her phone buzzed. She picked it up. A message from Marcus. "Where are you going?" She frowned. She decided to answer simply, "Out for breakfast." She waited, heart pounding, watching Josh drive. He kept his focus on the road. A few seconds later, her phone rang. It was Marcus. She sighed and answered. "Hello," she said, trying to sound normal. "Breakfast where?" he asked. His tone was sharp. "I wanted to stop by that place we talked about before." "Just a quick meal," she said. "No," he said. "Come back home now. I don't like you wandering around. If you need something, I'll arrange it. Turn around." Kate closed her eyes. She felt her jaw tighten. She looked at Josh in the mirror. He noticed her tense expression, but said nothing. She leaned closer so he could hear her next words. "Josh, turn around. We're going home," she said, her voice low and flat. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." He made a careful U-turn at the next street. Kate gripped her phone so hard her knuckles whitened. Marcus remained on the line. "I told you before, don't make plans without telling me," he said. "I just wanted breakfast," she said, trying not to raise her voice. "Your breakfast is at home," he replied. "We'll discuss this later." She ended the call without saying goodbye. She stared at the passing houses. She felt like she could scream, but she kept quiet. She had no way to argue. If she pushed too far, he would limit her access to her son again. She thought of the boy, tried to picture his face, his voice. She swallowed hard. Josh drove smoothly, returning the way they came. The silence was heavy, but Kate had nothing to say. She looked out the window at a small cafe on a corner. She had never been inside. She imagined what it was like. Maybe simple tables, friendly staff, fresh pastries. She would never know at this rate. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was the nanny sending a picture of her son coloring with crayons. Kate's chest tightened. She typed a quick reply. "Thanks for the photo." She did not bother asking about a visit. She knew it would be denied. As they neared the estate gates, Kate decided to break the silence. She felt like speaking to someone who might understand, even if only a little. "Josh," she said softly, leaning forward so she could speak at a normal volume. "You're new here, right?" He glanced at her in the mirror. "Yes, ma'am. I started last week," he said. She nodded. "How do you like it so far?" Her voice came out quiet, almost cautious. He shrugged slightly, keeping his eyes on the road. "It's fine," he said. "I do my work and follow instructions." Kate wanted to say more, to explain her situation, but she held back. He was just the driver, a new employee who probably wanted to keep a low profile. She felt silly for trying to start a friendly chat. Still, his calm presence was better than facing a silent wall. They passed through the security checkpoint. She saw a guard give a small wave. Josh acknowledged it. Kate wondered how many cameras Marcus had. She thought about the possibility of him watching her right now, judging her every move. The car rolled onto the driveway. The mansion's windows reflected the morning light. She could see some staff moving inside, opening curtains, arranging flowers. All that luxury felt hollow. She remembered the previous night's events and the tension that followed her into bed. Now, here she was, trying and failing to claim a small piece of normal life. She hated the feeling of being controlled at every turn. Josh stopped the car near the front steps. He stepped out and opened the rear door. Kate got out slowly, adjusting her blouse. She glanced at him, but he kept his gaze respectful and neutral. "Thank you," she said, her voice low. He nodded once. "You're welcome, ma'am." Kate walked toward the front door. Her heels clicked against the stone path. Before entering, she paused and looked back. Josh stood by the car, waiting. She wondered what he thought about all this. She wondered if he judged her for being weak, or if he understood the silent tension. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The house was quiet. She heard distant footsteps, maybe the housekeeper. She dropped her purse on a side table and moved toward the kitchen. She would have to make do with whatever breakfast waited for her here. She knew Marcus would have something to say about this later, and it would not be pleasant. She braced herself, inhaled slowly, and walked deeper into the house. Later that evening, Kate stepped out of another upscale venue. She had attended a dinner with Marcus and his business partners. Inside, Marcus had spoken over her every time she tried to add something to the conversation. When she mentioned a small idea about a fundraising auction, he dismissed it with a sharp laugh. The other guests looked at her and then looked away. Kate had stayed quiet for the rest of the meal. Now, standing beside the car, she clenched her purse and tried to calm her breathing. Josh waited near the rear door. He looked at her face as if checking if she was all right. Kate hesitated for a moment before getting into the car. She did not want to go back to the mansion, but she had no other option. She slid into the back seat and closed her eyes for a moment. Josh started the engine. He drove through quiet streets lit by street lamps. The car moved smoothly over asphalt. Kate did not speak. She stared at her phone, expecting a message from Marcus, some reprimand, but nothing came. She felt a tightness in her chest. She pictured her son's face again and wondered when she would see him. Each time she asked, Marcus found a reason to delay it. Josh said nothing until they approached the house. He stopped in front of the large iron gates, and the guard recognized them. The gates opened, and Josh drove up the driveway. The mansion lights glowed ahead, cold and bright. Kate unfastened her seatbelt, preparing to step out. She reached for the door handle. She wanted to get inside, take off her shoes, and be alone for a while. As Josh parked, he got out and opened the rear door. Kate placed one foot on the ground, but then paused. She looked around and saw no one else nearby. She wanted to say something. Thank Josh. Maybe. She turned her head slightly. Before she could speak, he leaned in closer. She saw his face come near hers without warning. She froze. His hand touched her cheek, gentle but firm, and his lips pressed against hers. The kiss lasted only a few seconds. Kate's eyes opened wide. She did not move. She could not breathe. She felt a sharp rush of confusion and shock. Josh pulled back, his face tense, his voice low and anxious. "I'm sorry," he said. "I shouldn't have done that." He stepped back, letting go of her face. He looked upset, like he regretted it immediately. Kate stared at him, still half inside the car. Her heart pounded. Her mind raced. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Her lips tingled where he had kissed her. She glanced at the mansion entrance and then back at him. She felt trapped between shock and curiosity. She managed to whisper something, but it was too soft to hear. Josh stood there, breathing heavily, looking away as if ashamed. She swung her legs out and stood up. Her knees felt weak. She adjusted her purse strap on her shoulder. Josh waited, unsure what to do. Kate wanted to yell at him, ask him why, demand an explanation, but words did not form. Her throat felt dry. Her mind was stuck on what just happened. No one had ever done something like that before. It had been so sudden and strange. At last, she shook her head and walked toward the door. She opened it and stepped inside. She heard Josh close the car door behind her, but she did not look back. Inside the foyer, the air smelled of cleaning agents and polished wood. The silence weighed on her. She leaned against a wall and tried to steady her breathing. She touched her lips with her fingertips, still feeling that brief warmth. She did not know what to think. She did not feel angry yet, just stunned. She moved through the hallway, heading upstairs. She needed to clear her head. Tonight had been one humiliation after another. Marcus had shown no respect for her at dinner. Josh had crossed a line by kissing her without permission. Everything felt off. Yet, something about the kiss lingered in her mind, a strange feeling that she could not define. In her bedroom, she removed her shoes and sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at herself in the large mirror. Her face looked pale. Her eyes were wide. She heard faint sounds from downstairs, staff moving around, maybe preparing for the next day. She stayed there for a long time, trying to understand her own reaction. Eventually, she stood up, washed her face in the adjoining bathroom, and returned to the bed. She wondered what would happen next time she stepped into that car. She wondered if Josh would avoid her. She wondered if Marcus would find out. She lay down, staring at the ceiling. She tried to push the thoughts away, but she could not. She knew that the next day would bring new problems, new restrictions, and new reasons to doubt herself. She tried to sleep, but her heart still beat fast. That brief kiss had changed something, though she was not sure what. The next morning, Kate woke up early. She had slept poorly, thinking about the night before. She changed into a casual dress and flat shoes, hoping to feel more relaxed. She went downstairs and found no sign of Marcus. He had probably left for his business meetings. The silence in the house felt heavier than usual. She headed to the kitchen. A maid placed fresh coffee on the counter. Kate poured a cup and took a seat at the small breakfast table near the window. Outside, the grass looked neatly trimmed. She sipped her coffee, trying to focus on its taste. She failed. Her mind drifted to the car, to Josh, to that impulsive kiss. The housekeeper walked in, carrying a folder of receipts. "Your husband asked me to give you these," she said. Kate nodded, took the folder, and put it aside. She did not want to deal with anything complicated right now. The housekeeper left without another word. Kate tried to keep her expression neutral. She wondered if anyone suspected something. She wondered if the cameras had caught the kiss. Her pulse quickened at the thought. She reached for her phone and checked messages. There was one from Marcus. "We have a charity meeting tonight at 8. Dress properly." She rolled her eyes and put the phone away. She finished the coffee and went outside to the driveway. Josh was washing the car. He wore a simple white shirt and dark pants. He paused when he saw her. She approached slowly, unsure what to say. Her heart rate increased as she remembered his face so close to hers. He stepped back, letting the water run off the car's hood. "Good morning, ma'am," he said quietly. His tone was careful. His eyes did not linger on hers for long. "Morning," Kate replied. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I need to go out later," she said, forcing her voice to sound normal. "I have some errands," Josh nodded. "Just let me know when," he said. He returned to washing the car, keeping his distance. Kate watched him for a few seconds. He did not bring up what happened. He did not apologize again. He behaved as if nothing unusual had occurred. Kate felt relieved and unsettled at the same time. She turned and walked back inside. In the hallway, she paused and listened. She heard footsteps upstairs. Probably a maid making the bed. She headed into the study and reviewed a few documents related to the charities Marcus supported. She tried to focus. Her eyes moved across the papers, but the words blurred in her mind. Later, near midday, she decided to leave for her errands. She gathered her purse and stepped outside. Josh waited by the car, the exterior now clean and dry. He opened the rear door without meeting her eyes. She got in and fastened her seatbelt, feeling a strange tension. He started the engine and drove off. They rode in silence for a few minutes. The streets outside were quiet. Kate cleared her throat. "Josh, about yesterday," she began. He kept his eyes on the road. "It won't happen again, ma'am," he said. "I know my place. I'm sorry." His voice was firm, controlled. Kate nodded slowly. "We don't need to talk about it, then," she said. She felt a knot in her stomach. She had thought about this moment all night, expecting something more. Instead, it sounded like a closed matter. They reached the shopping district. Kate had a few small tasks, picking up some documents at a lawyer's office and buying a personal item she needed. She stepped out of the car and told Josh to wait by the curb. She walked into an office building and returned about 20 minutes later, holding a sealed envelope. Josh stood by the car door, straight and quiet. He opened it for her, and she slipped back inside. "Anywhere else, ma'am?" he asked as he started the engine. Kate checked her phone. No new messages from Marcus. "Just one more stop at that pharmacy on the corner," she said. She looked out the window. The city around her moved at a normal pace. People walking, cars passing, no one caring about her private struggles. She felt like a stranger in her own life. Josh parked in front of the pharmacy. Kate went inside, bought a few items, and returned. This time, as he opened the door, she forced a small smile. He nodded, but said nothing. She understood he wanted to keep things professional. She respected that. She felt grateful he was not making it more complicated than it needed to be. On the way back to the mansion, the air in the car felt neutral but tense. Kate noticed Josh's grip on the steering wheel, how he kept his posture straight. She noticed how he never looked at her in the mirror now. It was a change from before, and it made her uneasy. She wondered what he thought about her. She wondered if he regretted it more than anything else in his life. She wondered if, deep down, she felt upset that he had apologized so quickly, not leaving room for any other interpretation. They reached the mansion gates. The guard waved them through. The driveway stretched out ahead, lined with trimmed bushes. Kate gathered her belongings, preparing to get out as soon as they stopped. The sunlight fell on the car's windshield, making her squint. Josh parked near the front steps. Marcus's car was there now. He must have returned. Kate frowned, bracing herself. She stepped out, and Josh closed the door behind her. She did not thank him this time. She was too focused on what waited inside. She entered the house and saw Marcus's jacket tossed over a chair. He was in the living room, on a phone call, sounding irritated. She approached slowly, waiting for him to notice her. He glanced her way, frowned, and continued talking. After a few minutes, he hung up. "Where were you?" he asked, folding his arms. "I ran errands," she said, holding the envelope. "I picked up these documents and got a few things I needed." Marcus eyed her. "Next time, tell me first." "I don't like surprises," he said. "I hope you are ready for tonight's meeting. I need you to behave properly." Kate nodded, avoiding his eyes. She held back any retort. She felt the tension in her shoulders. She wanted to ask about seeing her son, but she knew this was not the right moment. Marcus looked tired and annoyed. He turned away, dismissing her without a goodbye. She walked down the hallway, heading upstairs. She needed some quiet before the evening's event. On the way, she passed a window and saw Josh outside, walking toward the garage. He looked calm, as if nothing had ever happened. She forced herself to accept that it was over and done. In her bedroom, she placed the envelope on the desk. She checked her phone again. No new messages. She sat on the bed and took a deep breath. She would have to face another formal meeting, sit quietly by Marcus, and smile when required. She would have to pretend that she was fine. She would have to ignore the knot in her stomach and the heaviness in her chest. That evening, Kate stood in front of her closet, choosing a dress for the charity meeting. She picked a simple black one with a modest neckline. She slipped into it and put on a pair of low heels. She brushed her hair straight and applied light makeup. She wanted to look appropriate. Nothing more. Downstairs, the living room was quiet. Marcus had left instructions that they should arrive together at the event. Kate waited, checking her phone. She wanted to see her son soon, but she knew better than to ask right now. Marcus had been in a bad mood all afternoon. She wandered into the foyer and found Josh straightening his tie near the door. He wore a black suit and looked prepared to drive them. She approached him, keeping her voice low. "Josh," she said, "I need to talk to you." He looked up, his face calm but guarded. "Yes, ma'am?" She paused, unsure how to phrase it. "About the other night," she began, but she saw Marcus approaching from the hallway. She shut her mouth quickly. Marcus stepped closer. He glanced at Josh, then at Kate. "We're leaving now. The car is ready, right?" he asked Josh. "Yes, sir," Josh said. He moved to open the door. Kate watched him, frustrated that she could not continue the conversation. She followed Marcus outside. Josh opened the rear door of the car. Marcus got in first. Kate slid in next. She ended up seated behind the driver's seat, with Marcus beside her. The tension was thick. She wanted to clear things with Josh, to understand what he felt, but she had no chance now. The car glided through the streets. The silence inside was heavy. Marcus tapped his fingers on his knee. Kate stared out the window. She decided to try another angle. "Marcus, may I see our son this weekend?" she asked quietly. Marcus looked at her as if annoyed by the question. "Maybe," he said. "I'll let you know." He turned his head away, focusing on the passing lights. Kate clenched her hands together. She hated the uncertainty. She said nothing else. Josh drove smoothly, stopping at lights, turning corners without a word. Kate noticed a small device on the dashboard, a discreet camera lens. She frowned. Had Marcus installed new cameras inside the car? She remembered the kiss. She felt her heart race. If that moment was recorded, Marcus might know something. She had to be careful. When they arrived at the event hall, Marcus stepped out first. He straightened his jacket and offered his hand to Kate. She took it and forced a small smile. They walked into the venue, where wealthy donors and executives chatted and sipped drinks. Kate stayed close to Marcus, saying nothing unless asked. An hour passed. Marcus introduced her to several people, never letting her speak much. She saw Josh at the entrance, standing with other drivers. She wanted to approach him, but it would look suspicious. Instead, she pretended to study a painting on the wall. She felt trapped, knowing that Marcus's control extended to every part of her life. Eventually, Marcus stepped away to speak with a friend. Kate slipped into a quieter hallway near the restrooms. She leaned against a wall, breathing slowly. She tried to calm down. She heard footsteps and turned. Josh stood there, holding a small card from the organizer's desk. He saw her and froze. She moved closer, keeping her voice down. "Josh," she said, "I need to know something. Are there new cameras in the car?" Her voice was tight and urgent. He looked at the floor, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I noticed them yesterday. I didn't install them," he said. "They were placed there by someone else." Kate swallowed hard. "So, the other night." Josh cut her off. "I don't know if that was recorded," he said. He sounded worried. "I'm sorry, but I don't have a way to check. The cameras feed into the security system." Kate's heart sank. Marcus might have seen the kiss. That could explain his mood, his suspicious looks, the subtle pressure. She felt panic rising. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "What do we do?" she asked, voice trembling. Josh shook his head. "I don't know, ma'am," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have done what I did. I'm sorry." Kate rubbed her forehead. She had no time to solve this now. She needed to return to the main room before Marcus noticed her absence. "We'll talk later," she said. "Please, just act normal." Josh nodded once. He slipped back toward the main entrance, blending in with the other staff. Kate smoothed her dress and returned to the crowd. She spotted Marcus talking to two men. He glanced at her, eyes narrow, as if evaluating her every step. "Where were you?" he asked, joining her by the buffet table. He picked up a glass of water, not offering her one. "In the restroom," she lied. She tried to sound calm. "It was crowded, so I waited." He accepted her answer without comment. They stood side by side, watching people chat and laugh. Kate felt as if she was on a stage, performing. The idea of the camera recording that kiss made her stomach churn. She feared what Marcus would do if he knew. After another hour, they said their goodbyes and walked outside. Josh brought the car around. This time, Marcus sat in the back seat first, and Kate followed, silent as always. The ride home was quiet. She could sense Marcus's gaze on her at times. She kept her eyes forward, trying not to show fear. Back at the mansion, Marcus went straight to his office without a word. Kate stood in the foyer, listening to his footsteps fade away. She realized how fragile her position was. She had no proof of anything. She had limited access to her son. She had little freedom. Now, Josh's impulsive act threatened to bring even more trouble. She went upstairs and entered her bedroom. She closed the door and leaned against it. She thought about her next steps. She had to find a way out of this situation, a way to regain control. For now, she had to keep still and wait, hoping Marcus would not confront her. The next morning, Kate stood by a window in the upstairs hallway. She saw the gardens and the driveway. She waited, not sure for what. She had slept poorly, half expecting Marcus to burst in and accuse her of something. But he had stayed quiet all night. She decided to ask again about her son. She needed a reason to start a conversation that might lead somewhere. She went downstairs, following the sound of voices. In the living room, Marcus spoke on the phone. His tone was clipped and angry. She waited near the doorway. When he finished the call, he turned to face her. "You're up early," he said, crossing his arms. "I want to see my son," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You've been putting it off. It's time." Marcus stared at her. He did not answer right away. Then he smirked. "We'll see about that," he said. "But first, I need to know something. What have you been doing behind my back?" Kate's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" she asked, forcing innocence. He nodded toward the window, pointing outside. "My security cameras recorded something in the car. Something interesting. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Kate struggled to keep a calm face. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quietly. Marcus took a step closer. His voice lowered. "I saw enough," he said. "I'm not a fool. I see how you look around, how you act nervous. You think I can't ruin that driver's life? I can do it easily." Kate felt her throat dry. She thought of Josh, of the sudden kiss. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "It was nothing," she said. "He got too close. I didn't want it." Marcus's jaw tightened. "We'll make sure it doesn't happen again," he said. "He's fired, effective today. He'll be gone by noon." He paused, waiting for her reaction. Kate clenched her fists. "He was just the driver," she said, trying to sound indifferent. She felt panic rising, but she didn't show it. "I don't care if he goes," Marcus nodded, as if pleased. "Good," he said. "Now, about your son. If you think you can break my rules, you're mistaken. You want to see him, then behave. Any more stunts, and I'll cut your visits even more. I control the money, the connections, everything. You can't fight me." Kate's heart pounded. She wanted to scream at him, call him a monster. But she thought of her son, the only reason she still endured all this. She swallowed her anger. "I understand," she said, voice low. Marcus stepped away, grabbing his keys from a side table. "I'm leaving now. When I come back, I expect no surprises," he said. He left without saying goodbye. Kate stood there, breathing hard. She needed air. She walked out the back door, into the garden. She kept going until she reached the side of the mansion where Josh sometimes parked the car. She saw him there, leaning against a wall, looking at his phone. He glanced up when he saw her and straightened. "Ma'am," he said, his voice tight. "Marcus is firing you," she said quietly. "He knows. Or at least, he suspects." Josh nodded. "I guessed as much," he said. "I'm sorry I caused this." Kate looked around to ensure no one was listening. "He threatened me," she said. "He used my son against me. He thinks he owns everything, including me. I can't live like this anymore." Josh clenched his jaw. "Then don't," he said softly. "Fight back." "Fight how?" she asked. She felt desperate. "He has money, power, the best lawyers. He'll destroy me if I try." Josh shrugged. Then find a lawyer who believes in your case. Gather evidence. Don't let him push you around. Kate closed her eyes. She had never considered fighting legally. She always thought leaving meant losing everything. But if staying only brought more pain, what was the point? She took a shaky breath. "If I do that, he'll come after you," she said. "He'll make sure you never work again?" Josh shrugged again. "I'll survive," he said. "I can't watch this happen and do nothing. I'll help if I can." She looked at him, surprised by his calm tone. "Why would you help me?" He lowered his voice. "Because no one should live like this," he said. "You deserve better. Your son deserves better." Kate blinked, feeling a lump in her throat. She had no time to cry or show weakness now. She nodded. "I need time," she said. "I need to think, to plan. He's leaving you alone for now, but if I challenge him, he'll come for you too." Josh stepped closer, still keeping a respectful distance. "It's my choice," he said. "I can leave now and run, or I can stay and face it. I won't run." Kate pressed her lips together. "He expects you gone by noon. Don't make him suspicious. Just act normal. I'll call you later. We'll figure something out." Josh nodded. He looked around, then slipped away, heading toward the garage. Kate stood there, staring at the ground. She felt fear and anger battling inside her. For the first time in a long time, she considered breaking free from this prison. She would need help. She would need courage. She had little of both right now. But maybe that could change. She walked back inside, entering through a side door to avoid the staff. In the hallway, she saw her reflection in a mirror. Her face looked tense. She tightened her grip on her purse. If she wanted to save herself and her son, she had to try something different. She had to stop giving in. She had to push back. Upstairs in her bedroom, she sat down, took out her phone, and began searching for a lawyer who might understand her situation. She had limited time before Marcus returned. She had to start somewhere. This was her life, after all, and she would not let him destroy it. Later that afternoon, Kate left the mansion under the pretense of meeting a charity contact. Marcus was still out. She had arranged a private meeting with a lawyer who had a reputation for taking on difficult cases. She wore simple clothes, pulled her hair back, and carried a plain purse with some documents inside. She did not want to attract attention. Josh waited by the car. He had not yet been escorted out by the staff. Maybe Marcus was too busy to finalize that step. Kate approached him, keeping her voice low. "We're going to this address," she said, handing him a piece of paper with the lawyer's location. "Please be careful. Don't drive the usual route." He nodded. He opened the door for her, and she got in. He started the engine and took a back road, avoiding main streets with security cameras. Kate's heart pounded. She kept checking her phone. No messages from Marcus yet. She knew this was risky, but she had no choice. The lawyer's office was in a modest building. It was far from the upscale neighborhood she lived in. Josh parked in a small lot across the street. He watched as she stepped out. "I'll wait here," he said quietly. Kate nodded and hurried inside. In the narrow hallway, she found the lawyer's door. She knocked, and a muffled voice invited her in. The office was cramped, with old furniture and shelves of papers. A middle-aged woman in a gray suit stood behind a desk, sorting through files. She had sharp eyes and short hair. "Kate?" the lawyer asked, pulling out a chair. "I'm Carla." "Please, sit down." Kate sat and explained her situation in a calm, direct manner. She mentioned the emotional control, the financial pressure, the restricted access to her son, and the recent threat from Marcus. She kept her voice steady, although her hands shook slightly. Carla listened, taking notes. She asked simple questions. How often do you see your child? Do you have any financial records? Do you have any evidence of his threats? Kate answered each question carefully. She did not have much hard evidence yet, but she had some messages saved on her phone. She mentioned the cameras in the car. Carla took notes, nodding slowly. You can fight this, Carla said, setting her pen down. It won't be easy. He has money and influence, but we can build a case. We need to show a pattern of emotional abuse, control, and any illegal restrictions on your child. Kate swallowed. If I do this, he'll retaliate, she said. He'll try to ruin me. Carla leaned forward. He will try, she said. But the law is on your side. We can request court orders, custody hearings, and protection if needed. We need witnesses, documentation, anything that proves your claims. Kate thought of the staff. Most were loyal to Marcus. She thought of Josh. He might speak up, but that would put him at risk. She inhaled slowly. I'll try to gather what I can, she said. How long will it take? Carla shrugged. Depends on how he reacts. We can file a petition for custody and financial independence. We can ask the court to grant you temporary arrangements, but I need your commitment. If you're in, we do this all the way. Kate nodded. I'm in, she said. I can't live like this anymore. Carla gave her a short list of tasks. Find financial records, save text messages, note any conversations where he threatens her, and identify anyone who can testify. Kate's head swam. She felt fear and relief mixing inside her. She finally had a plan, but it would be dangerous. They agreed to meet again in a few days. Carla escorted her to the door. Be careful. Don't let him suspect too much, Carla said. Contact me if he becomes violent. Kate left the office and crossed the street. Josh stood by the car, looking nervous. Everything okay? He asked. She nodded slowly. We have a plan, she said quietly, handing him the lawyer's card. We have to be smart. Can you help me gather some records when I say so? He accepted the card and looked at her. Yes, he said. I'll help. Just tell me what you need. She got into the car, and he followed, starting the engine. She gave him an alternate route back, avoiding the main roads again. She clutched her purse tightly, feeling the weight of what she was about to do. She was going to fight Marcus. She would not just accept her fate. She would protect her son and herself at any cost. On the way back, she checked her phone. Still no word from Marcus. Maybe he was busy, or maybe he was waiting to surprise her. She looked at Josh's eyes in the mirror. He looked calm, but concerned. She was glad he was still here, at least for now. When they reached the mansion, Kate noticed Marcus's car parked outside. She took a deep breath and stepped out. She had to hide all signs of what she had done. She had to act normal. She had to smile if needed and pretend nothing had changed. Inside, she placed the lawyer's card at the bottom of her purse and smoothed her hair. Marcus stood in the living room, reviewing documents. He glanced up when she entered, but said nothing. She nodded at him and walked past, heading upstairs. In her room, she locked the door and checked her phone for Carla's contact. She saved it under a false name, just in case. She had begun something dangerous today, something that could shape her future. She felt scared, but also determined. She had no more illusions about Marcus's kindness. He would not give her freedom or fairness. She would have to take it. For now, she waited. Soon, she would start gathering evidence and prepare for the battle ahead. She would not warn him. She would stay silent and careful until the right moment. That night, Kate waited until late. The mansion was quiet. Marcus had retired to his study. She knew he kept important financial documents in a locked cabinet there. She needed evidence of his control and any funds they had built together. She needed proof that she had a right to part of it. She wanted to protect her future and her son's future. She left her bedroom and moved quietly down the hallway. She wore flat shoes to avoid making noise. Near the top of the stairs, she saw a faint light under the study door. She paused, listening. She heard Marcus's voice, low and tense. He might be on the phone? She waited, pressing herself against the wall. A few minutes later, footsteps approached. She stepped back into the shadows. Marcus came out, holding some papers. He looked annoyed. He muttered something under his breath and walked toward the main bedroom. Kate stayed still until she heard his door close. She hurried to the study. The door was ajar. The room smelled of ink and leather. She went to the cabinet and tried the handle. Locked. She searched the desk drawers. Inside one, she found a small key ring. She tried each key until one fit. She opened the cabinet and saw several folders. She took pictures of documents with her phone. Bank statements, investment accounts, property deeds. She tried to be quick and silent. She closed the cabinet, locked it, and returned the keys to the drawer. She left the study, heart pounding, and went back to her room. Inside, she checked the pictures on her phone. The quality was good enough to read. She would show them to Carla soon. This was progress. The next morning, Marcus cornered her in the dining room while she drank coffee. He stood close, glaring at her. "Where were you last night?" he asked. "I heard noises." Kate sipped her coffee calmly. "I slept poorly," she said. "I walked around the hallway." Marcus frowned. "You're restless lately," he said. "Don't try anything stupid." She said nothing. She set her cup down and met his gaze. He narrowed his eyes but said no more. He left for his office downtown. Kate waited until the house felt calm. Then she called Carla, speaking in a low voice in the privacy of her bathroom. "I have documents," she said. "I took pictures." "Good," Carla replied. "We'll use them." "Can you come by later this afternoon?" "Yes," Kate said. "I'll find a way." She ended the call and left the bathroom. She heard a quiet knock at her door. Opening it a crack, she saw Josh. He looked nervous. "They've told me to pack my things," he said softly. "I have to leave by noon." Kate's stomach tightened. "I'm sorry," she said. "I knew this would happen." He shrugged. "It's fine. I have nothing to lose. Before I go, what can I do?" She thought for a moment. "Can you confirm the camera feeds are stored somewhere? I need to know where the footage is kept." Josh nodded. "Security room in the basement. There's a backup drive," he said. "I saw a guard handling it once." Kate felt relief. "Thank you," she said. "I'll find a way to get that footage. You should leave before they cause trouble." Josh hesitated. "I wish I could do more," he said. "You've done enough," Kate said. "Thank you." They parted ways. Josh went to finish packing. Kate took a deep breath, thinking about the basement. She knew a guard usually stayed there. She might need a distraction. She walked down the hall and found the housekeeper. "Marcus wants some special wine tonight," she lied. I think it's in the basement storage room. Could you ask the guard to help you find it? The housekeeper frowned. Sure, ma'am. Kate waited a few minutes, then slipped down the back stairs. The basement door stood at the end of a dim corridor. She heard voices from the storage area. The guard would be busy helping the housekeeper. She opened the security room door quietly. Inside, she found screens and a computer. She searched quickly and found a stack of backup drives in a drawer. She picked one that matched the date of the kiss and slipped it into her purse. She closed the drawer and left, careful with every step. Upstairs, she hid the drive inside a shoebox in her closet. She felt her heart racing again. This would show Marcus's behavior, maybe even the controlling conversations he had with staff. It could help prove the atmosphere of intimidation. Later, as noon approached, she peeked out a window and saw Josh leaving with a small suitcase. He looked up once, toward her window. She gave a quick nod. He nodded back and walked away. Now she was alone inside the mansion, surrounded by staff loyal to Marcus. She gritted her teeth. She would not give up. That afternoon, she managed to leave the mansion under the pretense of meeting a decorator. The chauffeur took her to the same area as before. She slipped into Carla's office and handed over the phone with the photos and described the backup drive. Carla looked pleased. "This is good," Carla said, scanning the documents on the phone screen. "This shows joint assets, and the audio or video from that drive might show intimidation. We can build a case for joint custody and financial independence. We can show he uses access to your son as leverage." Kate nodded. "What next?" she asked. Carla leaned back. "I'll file the initial papers tomorrow. He'll be served with a summons to appear in court. He'll know you're fighting back. Be ready. He will try to scare you." Kate swallowed. "I'm ready," she said. "Just tell me what I need to do." Carla gave her instructions. Secure all evidence, make copies, prepare to testify. Kate left feeling tense but determined. She had never confronted Marcus before, at least not openly. Now she would face him in a place where his money might not buy the outcome he wanted. Back at the mansion, she found Marcus pacing in the living room. He looked up sharply when she entered. "You're away too often," he said. "Where are you going?" Kate shrugged. "Just handling small projects for the charities," she said. "You know I manage some details." He stepped closer, glaring. "Don't lie to me," he said. "I know you're up to something." Kate forced herself to hold his gaze. Her heart hammered, but she kept her voice calm. "I'm not doing anything wrong," she said. "If you have a problem, we can discuss it like adults," he snorted. "Adults? Don't pretend you have power here." She said nothing. She walked past him and went upstairs. She locked herself in her bedroom and checked her phone. Carla had sent her a message. "All set for tomorrow's filing. He'll be served soon." Kate sat on the bed, staring at the wall. Tomorrow, Marcus would know she was not backing down. She tightened her fists, feeling nervous but also strangely calm. She had evidence. She had a lawyer. She had a plan. She was done waiting for permission to live her life. The next morning, a courier arrived at the mansion with a thick envelope. Marcus was in the dining room, sipping his coffee. Kate stood nearby, pretending to arrange some flowers. The courier handed the envelope to Marcus and left without a word. Marcus opened it, eyes scanning the documents quickly. His face hardened. He threw the papers onto the table. "What is this?" he demanded, glaring at Kate. She stepped forward, heart pounding but voice steady. "Legal filings," she said. "I'm asking the court to grant me freedom and fair custody of my son. I'm done letting you control my life." Marcus rose from his chair, fists clenched at his sides. "You think you can fight me?" he snarled. "You have no idea what I can do to you." Kate stood her ground. "I know exactly what you can do," she said. "But I'm not backing down. I have evidence. I have a lawyer. I will show the court how you've limited my access to my son and used your money to trap me here." He snorted. "You're making a big mistake. You'll lose everything." Kate felt sweat on her palms, but she refused to show weakness. "I don't care about losing your money. I care about my son. I care about my freedom. I'll see you in court." Marcus stared at her, breathing heavily. Then he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Kate slumped against the wall, relieved but shaken. The staff stayed out of sight. No one wanted to be near this conflict. A week later, they stood in a small courtroom. Carla sat beside Kate, reviewing notes and whispering instructions. Marcus stood with his expensive lawyer, arms crossed, glaring at the judge's bench. The judge entered, and everyone sat down. Carla presented documents and images of joint financial accounts and messages in which Marcus threatened to restrict Kate's visits to her son. She handed over the backup drive, which contained recordings from the car cameras. They played selected clips showing Marcus's controlling instructions to his staff, ordering them to deny Kate certain outings and restricting her visits to her child. The judge listened carefully, eyes steady and neutral. Marcus's lawyer tried to discredit Kate, calling her ungrateful and unstable. But Carla countered with simple facts. She showed records of how often Kate requested to see her son and how often Marcus said no. She showed the pattern of control, the lack of financial freedom, and the pressure he applied through subtle threats. Kate spoke only when asked. She kept her answers short and direct. She described how she felt each time Marcus refused to let her visit her child. She spoke about how powerless she felt, trapped in that large house, unable to make simple decisions. She did not cry or complain. She just told the truth. Marcus refused to meet her eyes. He tried to keep a calm face, but his tension showed when he tapped his foot on the floor. His lawyer tried to steer the focus away from custody and onto financial matters, but the judge kept returning to the child's welfare. The judge asked why the father would restrict the mother's visits without reason. Marcus offered no good answer. After several hours, the judge announced a decision. Kate would gain partial custody of her son and secure a fair financial settlement. She would have the right to access shared property and would not be financially dependent on Marcus. The judge warned Marcus that any attempts to violate these arrangements could result in legal penalties. Kate felt a rush of relief and exhaustion. She thanked Carla quietly. Marcus stood stiffly, face red with anger. He left the courtroom without speaking to her. Outside, in the hallway, Carla shook Kate's hand. "You did well," Carla said. "Take care of yourself and your son." Kate stepped out into the sunlight. She breathed the fresh air, feeling lighter. She had fought back and won something real. She had a chance now, a starting point. There was still work ahead, adjusting to her new life, rebuilding trust with her child, and learning to stand on her own feet. But the hardest part was over. A few days later, she moved into a smaller house, away from the mansion. It was not as luxurious, but it felt more comfortable. It felt like a place where she could finally breathe. She waited on the porch for her son's arrival, tapping her foot nervously. Soon, a car pulled up. The nanny helped her son out. He ran to Kate, hugging her tightly. She crouched down, holding him, feeling his warmth. She smiled, heart full. Later that day, while sitting in the new living room with boxes still unpacked, she heard a soft knock at the door. She opened it and found Josh standing there. He looked unsure of himself, wearing casual clothes and holding a small basket of fruit. "I heard you moved," he said. "I just wanted to see if you're okay." Kate stepped aside, letting him in. The room was simple, bright, and calm. Her son sat on the floor, playing with a small car. Josh greeted the boy with a nod, then turned to Kate. "I'm glad you got what you deserved," he said softly. "A fair chance." Kate nodded. "I'm free now," she said. "I can decide my own path." She looked at the half-unpacked boxes and the modest furniture. She liked this new start. She had what mattered: her son, her independence, and the chance to make decisions without fear. Josh placed the fruit basket on the table. "If you need help with anything, just say so. If not, I'll go." Kate smiled slightly. "Stay a while," she said. "There's a lot to figure out. But at least now I can do it on my own terms." She sat down on a chair, watching her son play, feeling the tension fade. No more hiding, no more silent fear. She had faced Marcus and stood up for herself. Now she could rebuild her life, step by step, with no one pulling the strings. She looked at her son and knew she had made the right choice. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen